The silence of the Arizona desert before dawn carried a weight that felt almost physical. It was the kind of silence that didn't simply surround a person. It questioned them. At 5 o'clock in the morning, Stefano Maris opened his eyes and stared at the cracked ceiling above him. For a few seconds, he remained completely still. The house was dark, quiet. The old air conditioner hummed somewhere in the distance. Outside, the desert slept beneath a blanket of fading stars. Months had passed since he moved to Seco Ridge. Yet there were mornings when he still woke up expecting to see the sleek, white ceiling of his penthouse apartment in Phoenix. There were mornings when he still expected to hear the distant sound of city traffic instead of the lonely whisper of desert wind. Then reality returned. Slowly, relentlessly. He was no longer living the life he had spent 20 years building. At 45 years old, Stefano had once been considered one of the most respected architects in Phoenix. He designed luxury homes, commercial projects, entire neighborhoods. People trusted him to imagine futures that didn't exist yet. But now, his days looked very different. Now his world revolved around medication schedules, doctor appointments, grocery lists, and a woman sleeping quietly in the next room. His mother, Elena. Stefano sat up and rubbed his face. His body ached, not from construction sites, not from business meetings, but from exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that accumulated one difficult day at a time. The kind that settled deep inside the bones. He glanced toward the hallway. Silence. That was good. When Elena slept peacefully, every minute felt like a gift. He slipped out of bed and walked barefoot across the worn wooden floor. The house wasn't much. Small, old, modest. The complete opposite of the life he once lived. Yet he had grown strangely attached to it. Because inside these walls lived the person who had sacrificed everything for him. Long before he ever had the chance to sacrifice anything for her. The smell of coffee soon filled the kitchen. Stefano stood quietly by the window while the machine brewed. The eastern horizon had begun to glow faintly. Another day, another chance, another battle. He looked at the refrigerator. Medical notes covered the door. Appointment reminders. Medication times. Emergency contacts. The sight would have depressed most people. Instead, it grounded him. This was his reality. And despite the pain, he had chosen it. A floorboard creaked somewhere behind him. Immediately, Stefano turned. For a moment, fear flashed across his face. But it wasn't Elena. Just the old house settling. He exhaled slowly. Alzheimer's had taught him something few people understood. You never truly relaxed. Not completely. Even during peaceful moments, part of your mind remained alert. Listening, watching, waiting. Ready for the next crisis. Ready for the next forgotten memory. Ready for the next heartbreak. The bedroom door opened 20 minutes later. Elena appeared in the hallway, wearing a pale blue robe. She looked small, much smaller than the woman Stefano remembered from his childhood. Age had a way of shrinking even the strongest people. But her eyes still carried traces of the mother who had raised him, the woman who worked double shifts when money was scarce, the woman who never missed a school event, the woman who somehow made every struggle feel temporary. She stopped in the hallway. Confusion crossed her face. Where am I? The question landed like a knife. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Stefano smiled anyway. You're home, Mom. She blinked, looked around, looked back at him. Home? Yes. A pause. Then relief. Oh. The tension left her shoulders. Stefano felt his chest tighten. Moments like this never became easier. People often imagined Alzheimer's as forgetfulness. Misplaced keys, forgotten names. They were wrong. Alzheimer's was grief. Repeated endlessly, every day, every hour, every minute. You watched someone disappear in slow motion. And there was nothing you could do to stop it. Elena sat at the kitchen table. Stefano placed breakfast in front of her. For several minutes, they ate in silence. Then she looked up. Her eyes softened. "You're a good man." Stefano froze. Those 4 words shouldn't have affected him. But they did. Because some days she remembered, some days she didn't. And every time she recognized him, even for a moment, it felt like receiving a gift from a world that was constantly taking things away. He smiled. "Only because I had a good teacher." Elena smiled back. Then a shadow crossed her face. "Have you seen my son?" The words struck harder than before, because only seconds earlier she had known exactly who he was. Now that memory was gone again, vanished, like smoke. Stefano swallowed. "I'm right here, Mom." She stared at him, studied his face, and slowly smiled. "Oh, there you are." The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. Stefano turned toward the window so she wouldn't see the tears gathering in his eyes. Outside, the sun was finally beginning to rise over the desert. And like every morning, he silently reminded himself why he was here. Not because it was easy, not because it was fair. Because some people don't stop being family when life becomes inconvenient. And no matter what it cost him, he would never leave her behind. Tuesday arrived wrapped in the colors only the Arizona desert seemed capable of creating. Orange, gold, purple. The horizon looked as though someone had painted it by hand. Stefano stood in the front yard with a garden hose in his hand, watering the young Palo Verde tree planted near the fence. The tree wasn't impressive. Not yet. Its branches were thin. Its roots still struggled against the stubborn desert soil. But Stefano liked it. Maybe because it reminded him of himself. Both of them were trying to survive in a place neither had originally belonged. The morning air was cool, carrying the faint scent of dust and sagebrush. For a brief moment, everything felt peaceful. Then he saw her. A woman walking slowly along the sidewalk. At first, he barely paid attention. People walked through the neighborhood all the time. But something about her made him look again. She wasn't trying to attract attention. If anything, she seemed to be avoiding it. Her eyes remained fixed on the ground. Her shoulders carried a subtle heaviness, the kind that only years of disappointment could create. Stefano noticed details automatically. It was an old habit from architecture. Architects studied structures. People were structures too. Every movement told a story. Every posture revealed something hidden. This woman looked lonely. Not dramatic loneliness. Not the kind people talked about. The quiet kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that settled into a person's life so gradually, they stopped noticing it. As she approached the house, she finally looked up. Their eyes met. For a brief second, something unexpected happened. The woman smiled. Not because she was flirting, not because she was trying to impress him. It looked more like relief, as if she hadn't expected someone to acknowledge her existence. Stefano felt a strange tug in his chest. Without thinking, he spoke. "The sun gets brutal around here pretty quickly." She laughed softly. The sound surprised him. There was warmth in it. Warmth that seemed completely disconnected from the sadness he had noticed moments earlier. "It certainly does." She stepped closer to the fence. "I've seen you around." Stefano nodded politely. "I'm Stefano." "I know." The answer made her blush immediately. "Oh, that sounded strange." He smiled for the first time that morning. The expression transformed his face. Years of professional confidence still lingered beneath the exhaustion. Even now, despite everything he had lost, there was something naturally charismatic about him. Something calm, something reassuring. Connie noticed it immediately. "I mean," she continued nervously, "everyone knows you. You're Elena's son." Something changed in Stefano's expression. Whenever someone mentioned his mother, his attention sharpened. His entire world seemed to revolve around her now. "How do you know my mother?" Connie's smile softened. "Everybody loves Elena." For a moment, Stefano looked away. Toward the house, toward the window where his mother often sat. He wondered how much of the woman everyone remembered still existed. Then he looked back at Connie. "Thank you." The sincerity in his voice surprised her. Most people said thank you automatically. Stefano meant it. She could hear it, feel it. That brief conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. Yet after Connie continued walking down the street, Stefano found himself watching her disappear around the corner. Strange. He almost never thought about strangers. Especially these days. His life was too full, too complicated. Yet there was something about her. Not beauty, although she was attractive in a quiet way. Not romance, certainly not that. It was something else. A gentleness, a sadness, a familiarity he couldn't quite explain. The next morning she appeared again, and the morning after that. Then again, always around the same time, always passing by the house, always offering a smile. At first, Stefano assumed it was coincidence. Then, he began noticing patterns. She slowed down whenever she reached his property. She always waved to Elena if she happened to be sitting outside. Sometimes she stopped to talk. Sometimes she simply smiled and kept walking. And somehow, those small interactions began becoming part of his routine. Part of the day he secretly looked forward to. Not because he was lonely. At least, that's what he told himself. But because Connie never demanded anything. She never asked about Phoenix. Never asked about his career. Never treated him like a tragic story. Around her, he wasn't the architect who sacrificed everything. He wasn't the man abandoned by the woman he loved. He wasn't the exhausted caregiver. He was simply Stefano. And he hadn't realized how badly he missed feeling like himself. One morning, Elena was sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket. The disease had been particularly cruel that week. She barely recognized him, barely spoke. Stefano looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion sleep could never fix. Connie stopped near the fence. She looked at Elena, then at Stefano. "You look tired." He laughed quietly. "I've looked tired for months." "You hide it well." That made him smile. Years of professional training. Connie laughed. For a moment, the sound seemed to brighten the entire street. Stefano noticed something then. Something he hadn't allowed himself to notice before. Connie had beautiful eyes. Not youthful eyes. Not perfect eyes. Honest eyes. Eyes that had suffered. Eyes that understood things. And for the first time, in a very long time, Stefano caught himself wondering what kind of life she had lived. The realization unsettled him, because it had been months since he had been curious about anyone. The weeks passed quietly, at least on the surface. Inside Stefano, however, something had begun to shift. Nothing dramatic, nothing he could easily name. Just small moments, small observations, small interruptions in the loneliness that had become normal. Every morning seemed to arrive with Connie attached to it somehow. Sometimes she brought muffins she claimed were too many for one person. Sometimes she carried flowers from her garden. Sometimes she arrived with absolutely nothing except a smile and a reason to walk a little slower when she reached his property. And Stefano noticed. Of course he noticed. He noticed everything. He simply pretended not to. One Thursday morning, Elena was having a particularly difficult day. She had forgotten where the bathroom was, forgotten how to use the microwave, forgotten that she had already eaten breakfast. By noon, Stefano felt emotionally exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that left a person staring into space. Not because they were thinking, because they were too tired to think. He was helping Elena onto the porch when Connie appeared. She stopped immediately. "You need help?" Stefano shook his head. No. She smiled. That's not what I asked. For a second, he almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he carefully settled Elena into her chair. Then he looked at Connie. And something unusual happened. He told the truth. I'm tired. Connie nodded. No advice, no solutions, no speeches, just understanding. And somehow that felt better than anything else. Most people couldn't tolerate uncomfortable truths. They rushed to fix them. Connie simply sat beside them. That afternoon, she stayed for almost an hour, mostly talking to Elena, listening to stories that changed every 10 minutes, patiently answering questions that had already been answered. Stefano watched quietly from the kitchen window, and for the first time, he noticed something that unsettled him. Connie wasn't helping because she felt sorry for them. She genuinely enjoyed being there, as if their chaotic little household made her feel less alone. That realization stayed with him. Days later, he found himself thinking about it while driving home from a doctor's appointment. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the windshield. Elena slept in the passenger seat, and his thoughts drifted toward Connie. That surprised him, not because she wasn't attractive. She was. Not because she wasn't kind. She was one of the kindest people he had ever met. But because he had spent months emotionally frozen, surviving, existing, enduring. He wasn't supposed to be thinking about women, especially not now. Especially not while his life looked the way it did. Yet there he was, wondering whether Connie had eaten lunch, wondering what made her laugh, wondering why she always looked slightly sad when she thought nobody was watching. The thoughts irritated him, because they felt dangerous. Hope was dangerous. Hope made people careless. Hope made people forget reality, and reality was simple. His mother needed him. Every day, every week, every month, maybe for years. There were no guarantees, no timelines, no finish line waiting ahead. Stefano understood that better than anyone. One evening, while helping Elena prepare for bed, she suddenly grabbed his wrist. Her grip surprised him. For someone so frail, it was remarkably firm. She stared directly into his eyes, completely lucid, completely present. A rare miracle. You're lonely? The words froze him. For several seconds, he couldn't respond, because she was right, painfully right. I've got you, Mom. Elena shook her head. No. Her voice softened. The other lonely. Something tightened inside his chest. The kind of wound that never fully healed. Before he could answer, the moment vanished. The confusion returned. The clarity disappeared. And Elena looked around the room as if she had no idea how she got there. Stefano sat beside her bed long after she fell asleep. Thinking about loneliness. Thinking about sacrifice. Thinking about how strange life was. He had left everything behind to care for the woman who once cared for him, and somehow that decision had made him invisible. Friends stopped calling. Business contacts moved on. People assumed his life was over, finished, reduced to caregiving and obligation. Nobody looked at him the way they once had. Nobody except Connie. And that scared him more than he wanted to admit. Because when Connie looked at him, she didn't see a burden. She didn't see a failure. She didn't see a man whose best years were behind him. She saw something else, something he could no longer see in himself. One Saturday morning, he finally understood just how deeply she admired him. It happened accidentally. He was repairing a loose section of fence near the property line. Elena was sitting under the shade of the porch. Connie was talking to another neighbor across the street. Stefano wasn't paying attention until he heard his name. The conversation drifted through the warm desert air. He's a remarkable man. Connie's voice, soft, certain. The neighbor laughed. He's just taking care of his mother. Connie immediately shook her head. No. The word came out stronger than expected. No, that's exactly the point. Stefano stopped working. The hammer froze in his hand. He gave up everything for her. The neighbor shrugged. Most people wouldn't. Connie smiled sadly. I know. Silence followed. Then she added something Stefano would never forget. That's why he's different. Stefano lowered his head, suddenly unable to continue repairing the fence, because for months he had focused on everything he lost. The career, the relationship, the future he once imagined. But listening to Connie, he realized something. She wasn't impressed by what he used to be. She was impressed by what he chose to become. And for the first time in a very long while, Stefano wondered if maybe those were two very different things. As autumn slowly settled over Arizona, Stefano's life became a cycle of responsibilities that seemed to repeat endlessly. Yet somehow, every day demanded a new piece of him. The reality of caring for Elena was far more difficult than most people imagined. People saw the gentle moments, the smiles, the porch conversations, the occasional flashes of recognition. What they didn't see were the battles hidden between those moments. The sleepless nights, the emergency phone calls, the endless appointments, the fear, the constant fear. One morning, Elena woke up convinced she was 28 years old again. She wandered through the house searching for Stefano's father, calling his name repeatedly. The problem was that Stefano's father had been dead for nearly 20 years. For almost 3 hours, Stefano gently redirected her attention. 3 exhausting hours. 3 hours of repeating the same explanations. 3 hours of watching confusion replace understanding over and over again. By noon, Elena was crying. Not because she understood what was happening, but because somewhere deep inside her, she knew something was wrong. Stefano sat beside her on the couch and held her trembling hands. It's okay, Mom. Her eyes searched his face. Will you stay? The question shattered him every time, because she asked it often, and because she never remembered that he had never left. I'm not going anywhere. Slowly, she relaxed, like a frightened child finally finding safety. Connie happened to arrive a few minutes later. She stopped at the front gate. She didn't interrupt. She simply watched. And once again, she witnessed something few people ever saw. Patience. Pure patience. Not obligation. Not duty. Love. The kind of love that asks for nothing in return. The kind of love that remains even when recognition disappears. The kind of love that stays. Days later, Elena suffered a bad episode. A dangerous one. Stefano found her standing in the middle of the road before sunrise. Barefoot. Disoriented. Terrified. She had somehow unlocked the front door while he was asleep. His heart nearly stopped when he discovered her missing. For several horrifying minutes, he searched the neighborhood, calling her name, running from street to street, feeling panic consume him. Then he found her, standing beneath a streetlight, lost, confused, alone. The sight broke something inside him. He wrapped his jacket around her shoulders and guided her back home. Elena cried the entire way, and when they finally reached the house, she whispered something that haunted him for days. I'm sorry for being difficult. Stefano immediately knelt beside her, his eyes filled with tears. You are not difficult. She looked at him helplessly, like someone trapped inside a prison she couldn't escape. And for a brief moment, she seemed to understand exactly what was happening to her. That moment was almost unbearable. A week later, another challenge arrived. A severe infection. Suddenly, hospital visits became part of their routine. Stefano spent hours sitting beside hospital beds, hours under fluorescent lights, hours speaking with doctors, hours studying test results, hours pretending not to be afraid. The hospital staff quickly learned his name. They saw him constantly, morning, afternoon, night. Sometimes all three. While other visitors came and went, Stefano remained, reading to his mother, helping her eat, adjusting her blankets, holding her hand while she slept. One nurse eventually asked him a question. "Are you her son?" Stefano smiled. "Yes." The nurse looked surprised. "You never leave?" He glanced toward Elena. His answer came without hesitation. Neither did she. The nurse never forgot those words. Neither did Connie after hearing the story. Because stories traveled quickly through a small town. And everywhere Connie went, people seemed to have another example of Stefano's character. Another story, another sacrifice, another reason to admire him. Meanwhile, Stefano never saw any of it. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to be extraordinary. He was simply surviving one day at a time, one prescription at a time, one doctor's appointment at a time, one difficult morning at a time. There were days when he drove 40 miles just to pick up a medication that wasn't available locally. Days when insurance companies created endless complications. Days when medical bills arrived like unwelcome visitors. Days when exhaustion made every movement feel heavier. Yet somehow, he kept going. Because every time he considered how difficult his life had become, another memory surfaced. A memory of Elena, working double shifts, skipping meals so he could eat, repairing old clothes because she couldn't afford new ones, sacrificing silently, year after year, without ever complaining. Compared to that, how could he abandon her now? How could he place her in a facility and walk away? How could he pretend someone else could love her the way family should? He couldn't. He simply couldn't. One evening, after returning from another hospital visit, Stefano parked the truck in the driveway and remained sitting behind the wheel. The engine was off. The desert sky had turned dark blue. The stars were beginning to appear. Inside the house, Elena was finally asleep. For the first time all day, there was silence. He leaned his head against the steering wheel. Completely exhausted, physically, emotionally, spiritually. He felt older than 45, much older. Then he noticed movement. Across the street, Connie. She was standing on her porch, watching the sunset. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she lifted her hand. A simple wave. Nothing more. Yet somehow that small gesture felt like comfort, like understanding, like home. Stefano waved back, and for reasons he couldn't fully explain, the unbearable weight he had been carrying all day suddenly felt a little lighter. Not because his problems had disappeared, not because life had become easier, but because for the first time in a very long time, he no longer felt as though he was carrying everything alone. And although he wasn't ready to admit it yet, that realization frightened him almost as much as it healed him. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Stefano had started looking for Connie, not consciously. At least, that was what he told himself. But every morning, before stepping onto the porch, his eyes would drift toward the end of the street. Every afternoon, when he returned from appointments with Elena, he noticed whether her car was in the driveway. Every evening, he found himself wondering if she was sitting on her porch watching the sunset. The realization made him uncomfortable. Not because he disliked her. Quite the opposite. That was the problem. Connie had slowly become part of his life. Part of the rhythm, part of the quiet, part of the moments he looked forward to. And that terrified him. One afternoon, Elena was unusually energetic. The doctors often described Alzheimer's as unpredictable. Some days were dark. Others carried unexpected flashes of light. That day happened to be one of the brighter ones. Stefano helped her into the passenger seat and drove her to a small diner outside town, a place she used to love years ago. To his surprise, she remembered it. The old red booths, the waitress, even the strawberry pie. For nearly an hour, Stefano felt as though he had his mother back. Not the illness, not the confusion. His mother, the woman who raised him, the woman who taught him kindness, the woman who had spent decades putting everyone else's needs before her own. He listened to her stories, stories he had heard 100 times, stories from childhood, stories about his father, stories about mistakes and victories and ordinary days that had somehow become precious memories. Stefano smiled the entire time, because he knew moments like these were becoming rare, extremely rare. Then, without warning, everything changed. Elena stopped speaking. She looked around the diner, confused, lost, afraid. The clarity vanished, just like that, as quickly as it had arrived. "Where are we?" she whispered. Stefano felt his heart sink. The familiar pain returned. Yet he reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "We're okay, Mom." She stared at him, trying desperately to recognize his face, trying desperately to hold on to something that was slipping away. And once again, Stefano guided her through the storm, patiently, tenderly, without frustration, without anger, without complaint. Across the room, a woman watched the entire interaction. Connie. She had stopped by the diner to pick up coffee. She hadn't expected to see Stefano there. And she certainly hadn't expected to witness that moment. The way he comforted Elena, the way he smiled despite the pain, the way he protected her dignity even when she could no longer protect it herself. Connie stood frozen for several seconds. Something tightened inside her chest, because she realized she wasn't simply admiring Stefano anymore. She was falling in love with him, deeply, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Later that evening, Stefano sat alone on the porch. The desert air was warm. A soft breeze moved through the Palo Verde tree. Inside, Elena slept peacefully. For the first time all day, there was silence. Yet his thoughts refused to rest. They kept returning to Connie. The way she listened, the way she smiled, the way she never made him feel broken. Most people looked at him and saw sacrifice. Connie looked at him and saw value. There was a difference, a very important difference. Sacrifice invited pity. Value inspired respect. And respect was something Stefano hadn't felt in a long time. The problem was that he didn't know what to do with it. He didn't know what to do with her. What future could he possibly offer? What kind of relationship could survive a life built around hospitals, prescriptions, emergencies, and uncertainty? The questions followed him everywhere. They followed him while he cooked, while he cleaned, while he folded laundry, while he drove, while he lay awake at night, staring into the darkness. And the more he thought about them, the more convinced he became that Connie deserved someone else, someone free, someone available, someone whose life wasn't defined by responsibility, someone better. The irony was heartbreaking, because Connie was thinking the exact opposite. One Saturday morning, she arrived carrying a basket of homemade bread. Stefano opened the door. The smell immediately filled the house. He smiled. "You're spoiling us." Connie laughed. "I brought enough for your mother, too." Stefano stepped aside and invited her in. As she entered, she noticed something she had never fully appreciated before. Photographs, dozens of them, covering shelves, tables, walls, everywhere. Stefano as a child, Stefano as a teenager, family vacations, birthday parties, graduations, memories, a life. Connie stopped in front of one picture, a teenage Stefano standing beside Elena, both laughing, both happy. "You look exactly the same." Stefano laughed. "No chance." "You do?" His smile faded slightly, not from discomfort, from nostalgia. "I miss that version of her." The room became quiet. Connie looked toward the hallway where Elena was resting, then back at Stefano. "I know." His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, something passed between them. Not romance. Not yet. Something deeper. Recognition. The recognition of two people who understood loss, who understood loneliness, who understood that life rarely unfolds the way we imagine. The moment lasted only seconds, yet neither of them forgot it. Because sometimes the most important moments in life aren't dramatic. They aren't loud. They don't announce themselves. Sometimes they arrive quietly and change everything anyway. What neither of them realized was that the confession waiting ahead, the confession that would finally expose Stefano's deepest wound, was now much closer than either of them imagined. Over the following weeks, something changed. Not in Connie. She had stopped fighting her feelings long ago. The change happened inside Stefano, and that frightened him, because for the first time since arriving in Seco Ridge, he began imagining a future again. It happened in small moments, dangerous moments, moments he never intended to have. One afternoon, while waiting for Elena's prescription at the pharmacy, he caught himself wondering whether Connie would enjoy a restaurant he had once loved in Phoenix. Another day, while fixing a broken cabinet door in the kitchen, he found himself smiling at the memory of one of her jokes. One evening, while watching the sunset from the porch, he instinctively looked toward her house before realizing what he was doing. Every one of those moments carried the same realization. He was becoming attached. And attachment led to hope. Hope led to disappointment. Stefano knew that better than most. Life had already taught him that lesson. Brutally, repeatedly. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at the hospital, he sat beside Elena's bed while she slept. Machines hummed softly. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant. Outside the window, darkness had settled over the city. Stefano looked older than his 45 years. His shoulders sagged, dark circles shadowed his eyes. His hands trembled slightly from fatigue. For nearly 10 hours, he had moved between nurses, doctors, paperwork, insurance calls, medication adjustments, and endless waiting. Now silence finally surrounded him. And in that silence, his thoughts betrayed him. They returned to Connie. Again. He closed his eyes, almost angry with himself. What was he doing? What future was he imagining? A relationship? A romance? A second chance? With what time? With what freedom? With what certainty? The reality was sitting only a few feet away from him. His mother, fragile, sick, dependent, needing him every single day. Stefano lowered his head. For the first time in months, he felt guilty for wanting something for himself, as though simply imagining happiness was somehow selfish. The thought followed him home. It followed him into the shower, into bed, into the following morning, until eventually he made a decision. A painful one. He would create distance, not because Connie had done anything wrong, because she had done everything right. And that made the situation even more dangerous. The next few days felt different. When Connie stopped by, Stefano remained polite, kind, respectful, but distant. The warmth was gone. The easy conversations became shorter. The smiles became rarer. The pauses between words became longer. At first, Connie thought she was imagining it. Then she knew she wasn't. One morning, she arrived carrying fresh cinnamon rolls. Usually Stefano would invite her inside. Usually Elena would insist she stay for coffee. That morning, Stefano thanked her, smiled politely, and stayed on the porch. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. For the first time in months, Connie walked home with a heavy heart, because she recognized the signs. She had seen them before. People retreating, people protecting themselves, people building walls. The difference was that this time, she wasn't willing to accept it without understanding why. Meanwhile, Stefano was miserable. The distance wasn't helping. It was making everything worse. The house felt quieter. The mornings felt longer. The porch felt emptier. And Elena noticed. Mothers always notice. Even mothers fighting Alzheimer's. One afternoon, she looked up from her chair and asked a question that caught him completely off guard. "Where's the nice lady?" Stefano blinked. "What nice lady?" "The one who makes you smile." The words landed directly in his chest. For several seconds, he couldn't answer. Because Elena was right. Connie did make him smile, more than anyone had in a very long time. Perhaps more than anyone realized. Perhaps more than he wanted to admit. Elena studied him carefully. Then, in one of those rare moments when clarity broke through the fog of her illness, she smiled. "You like her?" Stefano laughed nervously. "I'm 45 years old." "And?" His mother raised an eyebrow. For a brief moment, she looked exactly like the woman who raised him. Strong, sharp, impossible to fool. Stefano shook his head. "It's complicated." Elena reached for his hand. "When something is good..." She paused, searching for words. "Don't run away from it." Then the moment vanished. The confusion returned. The clarity disappeared. But the words remained. They remained all evening, all night, and long into the following morning. Because deep down, Stefano knew the truth. He wasn't creating distance because he didn't care about Connie. He was creating distance because he cared too much. And for the first time since moving to Seco Ridge, he was beginning to wonder whether fear was making decisions that love should be making instead. 3 days. That was how long Connie lasted. 3 mornings of polite smiles. 3 mornings of conversations that felt carefully measured. 3 mornings pretending she didn't notice the wall Stefano was building. On the 4th day, she stopped pretending. The morning began like any other. The desert sun climbed over the horizon. Birds moved between telephone wires. A delivery truck rattled through the neighborhood. Stefano was replacing a broken porch light when he heard footsteps. He already knew who it was. He didn't need to look. "Good morning." "Morning." Connie stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. Usually she smiled first. Today she didn't. That got his attention. He set the screwdriver down. "Everything okay?" "No." The answer came immediately. Stefano blinked. Connie folded her arms. "I think that's what I'd like to ask you." The silence that followed felt uncomfortable. Not hostile, just honest. And honesty was far more dangerous. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." The words landed gently, which somehow made them harder to escape. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Connie sighed. "I liked you better when you talked to me." Stefano looked away, toward the street, toward anything except her eyes, because he knew exactly what she meant, and he knew exactly why he had been pulling away. Unfortunately, knowing something doesn't make it easier to explain. Connie climbed the porch steps, slowly, giving him every opportunity to leave. He didn't. "Did I do something wrong?" "No." "Then why are you acting like this?" Stefano laughed quietly, not because anything was funny, because sometimes laughter is easier than truth. Connie waited, the way she always waited, without pressure, without judgment, without trying to rescue him from his own thoughts. And eventually he spoke. "I think you're making a mistake." She frowned. "What mistake?" "Me." The answer surprised even him. Connie stared at him, then shook her head. "No, I'm serious." "So am I." A breeze moved through the porch. Somewhere inside the house, Elena called his name. Stefano instinctively turned. "1 second, Mom." His voice carried naturally toward the hallway. Connie noticed something. There was never irritation in his tone, never impatience. No matter how many times Elena called, no matter how many times she forgot, no matter how exhausted he was. The tenderness never disappeared. That realization only made what happened next more painful. Stefano looked back at her. "You see the best parts of me." Connie remained silent. "You don't see the reality." Now she smiled. A small smile, almost sad. Stefano. What? I see all of it. The word stopped him. Completely. I see the hospital visits. She counted on her fingers. The medications. Another finger. The sleepless nights. Another. The fear. Another. The responsibility. Another. The loneliness. That one landed hardest. Because she was right. She saw it. All of it. And somehow she was still standing there. Still choosing him. Still looking at him the same way. Stefano felt something inside him begin to crack. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Like ice thawing after a long winter. Dangerous. Uncomfortable. Necessary. Before either could say another word, the screen door opened. Elena stepped outside. Her hair was messy. Her robe hung loosely from her shoulders. She looked confused. Then she saw Connie. Immediately she smiled. Oh, good. Connie laughed. Good. Elena nodded. You're here. Stefano moved beside his mother, helping her toward the chair. Connie watched. Then Elena said something neither of them expected. Something so simple. Something so innocent. Yet devastatingly accurate. He smiles more when you're around. Silence. Total silence. Even Elena seemed unaware of what she had just done. Stefano looked down. Connie looked away. And for the first time since meeting each other, neither knew what to say. Because some truths become impossible to ignore once they've been spoken aloud. And neither of them could pretend anymore. The call came at 2:17 in the morning. Stefano woke instantly. Years of responsibility had trained his body to react before his mind fully understood what was happening. For a second, he stared into the darkness. Then he heard it. A crash, followed by Elena's voice, frightened, confused, calling his name. He was out of bed before his feet fully touched the floor. His heart pounded as he rushed down the hallway. Mom? No answer. Only another sound, something falling. Stefano turned the corner and froze. Elena was on the kitchen floor. A chair lay overturned beside her. For one terrifying moment, he couldn't breathe. Mom! He dropped to his knees. Elena looked disoriented. One side of her forehead was already beginning to swell. Pain flashed across her face. What happened? She looked around helplessly. I don't know. Stefano closed his eyes briefly. The answer wasn't surprising. The disease stole memories. Now it had stolen the accident itself. Within minutes, he had called an ambulance. The ride to the hospital felt endless. Elena drifted between confusion and exhaustion. Sometimes she recognized him. Sometimes she didn't. Each transition hurt. Every single one. By sunrise, doctors were running tests. By noon, they decided to keep her under observation. Stefano barely left the room. He sat beside her bed, answered questions, signed forms, spoke with specialists, listened carefully to every update. Hours passed. Then more hours. The hospital became its own little universe. A place where clocks moved differently. A place where exhaustion never fully disappeared. By late afternoon, Stefano looked drained. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes were red. He couldn't remember the last time he had eaten, the last time he had rested, the last time he had thought about anything besides his mother. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. He turned and blinked. Connie stood in the doorway, holding 2 paper bags. Stefano stared at her, genuinely surprised. What are you doing here? Connie stepped inside. Asking that question tells me you haven't eaten. Stefano almost smiled. Almost. She placed one bag on the table, then another. Sandwiches, coffee, fruit, simple things, necessary things, things he had completely forgotten. You didn't have to do this. I know. She pulled a chair closer and sat down. No speech, no dramatic entrance, no attempt to take over. She simply sat there. Like she belonged. Like helping was the most natural thing in the world. For several minutes, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It felt comfortable. Safe. Stefano finally opened the sandwich. The first bite reminded him how hungry he actually was. Connie pretended not to notice, but she noticed everything. An hour later, Elena woke up. Her eyes wandered around the room, confused, searching. Then she saw Connie. Immediately, her expression softened. "Oh?" Connie smiled. "Hello, Elena." Elena looked from Connie to Stefano, then back again. A slow smile appeared, one filled with unexpected mischief, the kind Stefano hadn't seen in months. "You found one?" Stefano frowned. "Found one what?" Elena pointed toward Connie. "A good one." Connie laughed. Stefano buried his face in his hands. For a few seconds, the room felt lighter. The fear retreated. The stress eased. Even the machines seemed quieter. And while everyone was laughing, Connie noticed something that made her heart ache. The moment Elena smiled, Stefano smiled too. Not the polite smile he gave strangers, not the careful smile he wore around neighbors. This one was different. This one came from somewhere deep, somewhere untouched by exhaustion, untouched by grief, untouched by fear. For a brief moment, she saw the man he used to be, the man hidden beneath months of sacrifice. And in that moment, Connie understood something. She wasn't falling in love with Stefano because he was handsome, though he was. She wasn't falling in love with him because he was charming, though he was that too. She was falling in love with him because, even under impossible circumstances, he never stopped being kind. The world had taken almost everything from him. Sleep, freedom, certainty, the future he once imagined. Yet somehow, it had failed to take the best parts of him. And that made him rarer than he realized. Much rarer. Meanwhile, Stefano sat beside his mother's bed, completely unaware of the storm growing inside Connie's heart. Because if there was one thing he still couldn't see clearly, it was his own worth. A few weeks later, Elena returned home. The doctors were satisfied with her recovery. Stefano was grateful, exhausted, but grateful. That evening, after helping his mother settle into bed, he stepped onto the porch carrying 2 cups of coffee. The desert sky was breathtaking. Deep shades of orange melted into purple. The first stars were beginning to appear. Across the street, Connie sat on her porch swing, as if she had been waiting. Stefano crossed the road. The coffee in his hand suddenly felt heavier than it should. "Thought you might want one." Connie smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." He handed her the cup and sat beside her. For a while, neither spoke. The silence felt earned, comfortable, like something that had slowly been built over months. A rare thing, the kind people spend years looking for. Below them, the quiet street stretched into the evening. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A truck rolled past, then disappeared. The town settled into night. And for the first time in a very long time, Stefano felt no urgency to be anywhere else. No appointment, no emergency, no phone call. Just this moment. Just this woman beside him. Connie eventually broke the silence. "You miss Phoenix?" It wasn't a question. Stefano smiled softly. "Sometimes." "What do you miss most?" He thought for a second, then laughed. "The version of me that lived there." Connie turned toward him. Stefano stared at the horizon. His voice became quieter, more vulnerable. "I had plans." A small smile appeared. The kind people make when they think life will follow the schedule they designed. Connie listened. Stefano continued. "I thought I knew exactly what the next 20 years would look like." He looked down at his coffee. "I was wrong." A long pause followed, then another. Finally, he spoke again. "I thought success would make everything easier." His smile faded. It didn't. The breeze moved gently between them. Stefano leaned back. For the first time since she had met him, he seemed willing to let her see everything. Not the strong version. not the capable version, the real one. I spent years building buildings. His eyes drifted toward the stars. Then one day I realized the most important thing I had ever built was sitting alone in a house 3 hours away. Connie felt her chest tighten, because she knew exactly who he meant. Elena. Stefano swallowed. When the diagnosis came, his voice cracked, only slightly, but she heard it. I wasn't brave. He shook his head. People think I was brave. A quiet laugh escaped him. I was terrified. Connie remained silent. Stefano continued. I knew what choosing my mother would cost. His eyes glistened. I knew what I would lose. Another pause. Longer this time. I just couldn't live with myself if I didn't do it. The street seemed quieter now, almost as though the entire world had stopped listening. Connie watched him carefully. Every word, every expression, every emotion. And what she felt wasn't admiration anymore. Admiration had happened months ago. This was something deeper. Something irreversible. Stefano stared into the darkness ahead. I won't lie. The honesty in his voice felt raw. There were nights I was angry. Connie nodded. Of course there were. There were nights I wondered if everyone else was right. His eyes lowered. If I had ruined my own future. The confession hung between them, heavy, painfully honest. Then he laughed quietly, the kind of laugh people use when they're trying not to cry. And the worst part? Connie waited. Stefano looked toward her, directly toward her. For the first time all evening. The worst part is that after all this time, he hesitated. I still don't know if I made the right choice. The words broke her heart, not because she agreed, because she knew exactly how much pain it had taken for him to say them. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Then she reached for his hand, slowly, gently. Stefano looked down. Neither pulled away. Connie smiled. A smile filled with tenderness, a smile filled with certainty. A smile that seemed to carry years of loneliness finally coming to an end. You really don't see yourself, do you? Stefano frowned slightly. What do you mean? Connie laughed softly. A tear escaped before she could stop it. She shook her head, almost amazed. Then she looked directly into his eyes. I've spent months watching you. Stefano's expression softened. Connie continued. I watched you carry groceries with one hand and support your mother with the other. A tear rolled down her cheek. I watched you spend entire days in hospitals. Another smile, another tear. I watched you answer the same question 20 times without losing your patience. Her voice trembled. I watched you choose love when choosing yourself would have been easier. Stefano looked away, overwhelmed. Connie squeezed his hand. No, Stefano. His eyes returned to hers, and for the first time, she allowed herself to tell him the truth. The whole truth. I didn't fall in love with you despite your circumstances. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I fell in love with you because of who you are inside them. Stefano felt something inside him break, not in pain, in relief. Years of guilt, years of pressure, months of loneliness, all dissolving beneath the weight of being understood, truly understood. The silence that followed felt sacred. Neither wanted to rush it, neither wanted to move. Eventually, Stefano took a slow breath, then another, and finally spoke. I moved here to take care of my sick mother. His voice was rough, emotional. I thought I lost everything because of that decision. Connie smiled through tears. A beautiful smile, the kind that changes a person's life forever. She looked at him, really looked at him, then gave the answer neither of them would ever forget. The answer that would stay with Stefano for the rest of his life. The answer that made every difficult day feel worth surviving. Connie squeezed his hand, her eyes shining beneath the Arizona stars, and she whispered, "This was the best date of my life." For the first time in months, maybe years. Stefano smiled without sadness, and under the endless desert sky, surrounded by silent stars and second chances, two lonely hearts finally stopped carrying their burdens alone.